Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. And welcome. My name is George Jow. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Services at Dominican Hospital, and I'm also the Chair of the Planning Committee for the Symposium. And again, I'd like to welcome you all here this morning. Today's symposium is being recorded by Community Television of Santa Cruz County for future cablecast. Each year I like to celebrate the fact that this symposium is televised by Community Television, and it gives an opportunity for the entire community to gain the same information that you're going to hear today. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Joshua Nadherny Calciano.
Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to our 12th annual John E. Nadherny Calciano Memorial Youth Symposium. That's a mouthful. I want to welcome all of you here today, and especially new attendants. Funny story, I actually have my old 8th grade school principal, so I better be on my best behavior. Our family is incredibly gratified to have seen this symposia in memory of our son and brother John develop over the years into the widely attended event of today. John was 23 years old when he passed away, and as difficult as our loss continues to be, the sense of community coming together to help prevent similar tragedies from affecting other families is a very healing force. Our appreciation goes out to all of those who have helped the initial concept, contributed to the funding and planning of the details of each annual symposium. We are particularly gratified to all the members of the Dominican Hospital Foundation for all their help. We could not put these symposiums on without you. We continue to be impressed by the literally thousands of attendees, clinicians, and counselors, and educators, parents, and public school safety officials who have day-to-day contact with young people that have attended this symposium year after year. The post-symposia comments and the number of attendees that return year after year clearly show that together we are making a real impact on our community. We invite all of those interested in helping provide our local youth with a healthy behavioral health environment and the best possible support system to join us today and in future symposiums. Nothing could be a better tribute to my brother John. Thank you. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Farley. Dr. Farley is currently the L.H. Cornell Professor at Temple University in Philadelphia. He received his bachelor's and master's from the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, and he has a PhD in psychology from the Institute of Psychiatry, University of London, England. He is also the former president of the American Psychological Association. His bibliography includes over 225 articles and 8 books. His areas of scholarship include child and adolescent development, the new media, internet, cyberspace, personality, motivation, thrill-seeking, and risk-taking, crime, violence, delinquency, creativity, movies, the arts, political psychology, sports psychology, heroes, and heroism. He is frequently interviewed or quoted in the media, including New York Times, USA Today, The Washington Post, Time, Newsweek, U.S. News, Business magazines, family magazines, network news, public radio, local TV, radio, and print. So it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Frank Farley.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Wow. Welcome to the global village. Make yourself comfortable. Feel at home. Your kids are already here. Marshall McLuhan, in an earlier generation, any of you ever heard of Marshall McLuhan? the great communication theorist. He and I grew up in the same town in Alberta, Canada, although I only met him once, but he's long gone, and I'm still holding on. So, Marshall McLuhan coined the term the global village some time ago, and what he said was that telecommunications and communication technologies are going to convert this world into one village, like the way it was, I guess, way, way back when we all lived in little villages and everybody knew everybody else's business and we knew everyone's name. And I can't think of anything more prescient in the recent history of scholarship than Marshall McLuhan's prediction, because it has clearly come true. Kids are growing up inside the internet. They're not consumers of it, they live there. We use the terminology digital natives for kids like that. I have a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, they're both digital natives, they live there. I'm a digital immigrant. And so they're living inside it. They are not consumers. And that is going to have to change our whole understanding of kids and child development and psychology. We're going to have to throw a lot of the old books out that were based on understanding kids in a different world. We have to understand them now where they live, and that's where they live. If Margaret Mead, you might remember her classic work, Growing Up in Samoa, or no, Coming of Age in Samoa, if she were alive and were to write that today, she would be entitling it Coming of Age in Cyber. That's where the kids are living. Timothy Leary. Any of you remember Timothy Leary? What was it? Turn on, tune in, drop out? He wanted to die on the internet. His view was that the internet is becoming a form of global consciousness, a whole new realm of consciousness, almost Jungian in nature. And he wanted to die on it. I don't know if he did or not. It's a bit tricky. How do you die on the internet? I guess you could. But anyway, I don't think he did, so he didn't realize that part of his dream. And so you can't escape it. Even the Luddites can't escape the modern communication technologies. I live in Philly, not too far from the Amish community of Lancaster. Even they can't escape it. Some of the Amish kids are telling their parents, couldn't we have a computer? No. Maybe a TV? Well, not yet. And if you know the Amish, they eschew all of this kind of stuff, but they're apparently having great trouble keeping it away from their kids. Well, connectivity is the game. Connectivity. This concept has been central, for example, to Google's success. It is creating a net that allows for information to be interrelated with speed and facility, and it's getting better all the time. One of the promissory notes I hope we are able to cash sometime soon is the therapeutic possibilities and the possibilities for personal development of games and other features of the internet. If we can construct cyber alter egos, create a new personality online, and develop relationships with other characters, can we then learn solutions to entrenched relationship problems and conflicts? Can we gain personal insights heretofore hidden? Can we evolve problem solving that will serve us in real as well as virtual worlds? Will we get second chances to figure things out in this strange passage called life, with a new projected life where things can be explored with less baggage and fewer priors? I don't know if I'll have time to talk about Second Life, but there's a whole developing research enterprise concerning Second Life. And can people go online, get in Second Life, and solve some of the problems they were incapable of solving in the real life, in the real world? And that's an interesting concept. An issue that should be of concern to all of us is that if children's center of gravity leaves the family and the neighborhood and the real community and becomes instead the texted, videoed, audded, A-U-D-E-D, audded world of communication technologies, with endless communications with vast, often never met friends, and others, will their lives be less grounded, with less sense of self and identity, and become more absorbed into a world of false emotions and insecure commitments and connections? Will text messaging on banal topics from the edge of the Grand Canyon be a harbinger of digital dumbing down of the entire culture, of cordless umbilical cords, and the vacating of the essential human motive of adventure and risk? Will constant being in touch become the mediated mantra of the next generation, reducing independent and critical thinking and paving the way for mass movements of some variants of mind control? Or, alternatively, will the new interconnectedness provide greater understanding of diverse others and garner broader perspectives and facilitate more positive relationships among peoples? To me, those are some of the big issues. If we lose our kids from the regular communities that we have historically, and they migrate into this new world, what will it mean for their lives? Well, I'm going to go through a few slides. I called it Youth and Internet, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because Clint Eastwood lives near here somewhere. So, you know, I'm trying to be appropriate. Plus, by the way, he made a movie in this building on the Sudden Impact. If you remember that movie, I think a significant part of it was shot right around this area here, Sandra Locke, and if you remember that movie. So I used that it's one of the few movie titles that's actually entered the culture and got its own life. So, what I want to do here is it's a once-over lightly with some issues confronting youth and the internet, and then this afternoon we've got a full 2 hours where we can do a lot of interaction and questions and answers and so on. Well, so we're going to take a look at the good, the bad, and in some cases the ugly. Learning via the internet. Good aspects: a world of information is available at one's fingertips, an amazing resource for schoolwork and extracurricular activities. Digital natives now use it as a major source of learning. My 13-year-old wrote a 38-page paper the other day on Ethiopia, and she did it all through the internet, typed it up herself. I can't even get my college students. If I were to ask for a 38-page paper, there would be open revolt. She didn't even think about it. I got them both iPod Touches the other day. Expensive gadgets, by the way, but the iPod Touch with 32 gig, what a powerhouse. And that's one of the trends that clearly is going on, the micro-miniaturization of this whole, everything we're talking about, into a handheld device, where you've got literally everything. And they just use it, the internet, all sorts of stuff that you can get into this iPod Touch. And in, a couple of years, it'll be obsolete. I guess I'll have to get the next variation. So those are the good things. What's some of the bad things about learning in the internet? Just to summarize briefly. Well, you might learn the wrong things. Bad information, invalid data, biased sources, the wiki world. The wiki world keeps me up at night. Okay, so I got to get a life, but I won't let my students, college students, use Wikipedia information. I mean, what a system this is, where anybody can pile into a dictionary or into the encyclopedia and just write whatever they think that they want to write. And that's the wiki world. It's interesting, it's very populist, and it's, I don't know, it just seems kind of democratic, and it distributes knowledge in an unusual way, but it can be very bad. And we got an enormous amount of bad information out there. As a professor, I see it's just coming at me. And it's shocking often. Bad information, People don't know the good from the bad. We're the crap detectors, you know, to say this is valuable and this is invaluable. This is wrong, this is right, etc. That's become a serious problem, I think, in the use of the internet for learning. Let's go to thinking. And we can come back to some of these maybe, but well, some of the good things about thinking and the internet. You can find critiques, arguments. I mean, the whole blogosphere is just full of argument. You know, some people have characterized us as living in the argument culture. We argue over everything. And the blogosphere has just opened the floodgates to argument and dispute. And it becomes hard for a learner to know what's right, what's wrong. You get critiques, arguments, multiple sides to issues. That's good stuff, though. Mental challenges, puzzles that can facilitate thinking skills. Some scholars suggest online and other video games may facilitate problem solving, decision making, cause-effect thinking. I think if we get time, we'll come back to this issue because I'm extremely interested in video games. Kids are, you know, when Grand Theft Auto #4 appeared last year, like in the first 2 or 3 weeks, it sold $500 million worth of Grand Theft Auto #4, and parents are afraid of all these video games and so on, but there's a lot of interesting research and discussion coming out on video games, and they're not going to go away anytime soon, so we really need to deal with them. But what kind of thinking will the internet produce down the road? Again, the blogosphere, the bloated blogosphere, I might say, produces all of these viewpoints and alternatives. You're familiar with flaming. People get mad. I did something in the Washington Post interviewed me several months ago about something or other, and the Washington Post runs commentary online. So I flipped to the commentary. Actually, I don't like to look at the commentary because it's so frequently negative. See, in my classroom, I don't get negative commentary. But boy, out there in the blogosphere, holy cow. And it had to do, I'm trying to remember what it had to do with. It might have had to do something with Hillary Clinton when she was in her campaign and she said Bosnia, she flew into Bosnia in 1996 and there was gunfire. Well, the blogosphere just went nuts over that. Everybody went nuts, saying she was lying. Well, actually, memory theory, as we understand it today, constructive theories of memory and generative models of human memory, would actually accommodate what she did. It's not that she was lying. It could, in fact, be a normal memory error. I mean, 10, 12 years earlier, you fly into what was, in the very recent past, a war zone, then 10 years later, you might, in your reconstructive memory, think that there was something that happened along those lines. So it was understandable in terms of early memory, or in terms of current memory theory. But the blogosphere was horrendous. One person had an entry in there, she should be shot. That's flaming. And the negativity on the internet is breathtaking. It's like it's bringing out, because everyone's got the platform, it's bringing out so much negativity in our culture. So that worries me in terms of thinking. The bad, you get the wrong ideas, destructive ideas, dangerous or immoral ideas. You can learn biased thinking. We are awash in biases. The whole field of cognitive psychology is unearthing all sorts of thinking biases that we have. You know, one of the famous ones is confirmation bias, where you have a theory about things and just about everything that you see seems to confirm your theory. So there are lots of biases. Well, you can learn some of these biases online. And we have no control over all of this. That's one of the big problems. We have school boards in America. If you have problems with your school, you can go to your school board and raise heck. What do you do about the internet? Who do you go to? The FTC, forget it. They're toothless and they're very remote. So who do you pressure to do things about the internet? Motivation. obviously the internet is enormously motivating. We may, if we get time, talk about addiction. There's a big debate over the concept of internet addiction. I personally have doubts that it exists. I mean, you can get kids who use the internet at extreme levels, but is it an addiction in the sense of an alcohol addiction, or is it actually due to other underlying causes that should be what we're paying attention to? So if we get time, we might get to that. But motivation's unbelievable on the internet. The variety, the sensory experience that you can get can be exciting and motivating. It promotes engagement, promotes attention, on task. And how can teachers compete with all this stuff, by the way? I have back in Philly a couple of photographs. One is of a New York City school room around about 1890, 120 years ago, roughly. And what does that schoolroom look like? Kids are sitting at desks. There's a blackboard up at the front, and there's some writing on the blackboard. It's not radically different from a classroom today. I have another picture taken near Emporia, Kansas at about the same time in a rural school. Basically, it looks the same. Kids sitting at desks and a teacher and a blackboard, you know. Today it would be a whiteboard or whatever. But wow, you know, it's not that radically different when you think that we can now project our voice across the world. We've been to the moon. We have automobiles. It's incredible, the changes that have taken place. But boy, you look at education, it hasn't changed that much. But look at what's happening in the lives of kids. That's what the change is dramatic there. For example, I often think that universities should require that teachers who get educated at a university be required to take theater classes, performance classes, you know, because look who you're competing with. You're competing with the excitement value of the internet that's got everything you can think of. And how can teachers compete? I think that the job of a teacher is going to get dramatically worse going forward unless we do something about it. They just can't compete. One of the things that worries me in American schools, it's almost like a cancer that's been slowly growing, is the increase in rated boredom by high school graduates. And when they're asked, high school graduates over many years are asked, how boring was school? It's going up. To me, that's like a cancer working in the body politic of education. If kids are getting bored with schools, we've got to do something about it. That's motivation. Well, the internet is fantastic where it comes to motivation. How about the bad stuff? Does it enhance ADHD? I don't know. Some people think it might. Getting distracted from the things you need or should learn or know because of irrelevant stimulation. I mean, that happens to me all the time. I get on the internet looking for some scholarly thing, and then I see something else. You know, I'm gone. You get addicted to the technology use. I should put addicted in quote marks there, and are constantly motivated to be online. Thus, school and other offline pursuits take a back seat. We've got to be worried about that. Motivation is one of the most important, fundamental, basic issues in learning and schooling. Engagement, on-task behavior, interest level. And the internet is one heck of a competitor for everything that we do in schools. Inspiration. How do you inspire kids? That's a timeless question. It goes way back. Heroes clearly is one of the things that can inspire kids. Do you know who most kids' heroes are? Anyone? I study heroes probably as much as anyone in America. So I'm always asking people who their heroes are. Who do you think Americans' kids, who do they rank as their top heroes? Entertainers, I hear for entertainers. Athletes, I hear for athletes. Who? Peers, I hear for peers. Who said that? Stand up, please, if you don't mind. No, I'm kidding. Parents. To me, that's a very positive thing. We discovered that several years ago when we started doing heroes research. And heroes research had usually been done where there's a list of names given to kids and who is your hero. And so there's the president. I mean, some of this research was done during the Nixon era, for God's sake. But anyway, it's okay. So the president, the Pope, you know, and also, or whatever, all sorts of religious and political and famous figures and so on. And I looked at that and I said, that's not the way to study heroes and kids. Let them tell their own story. So we started asking kids to just simply write down their heroes. We didn't even define hero. We didn't give any list of names. We had a separate list for male and female. Unfortunately, in this culture, if you only ask for heroes, it'll tend to be dominated by male figures. So we had separate for male and female, and all of a sudden it was mom and dad. And here's an interesting thing. We then studied it from young kids, elementary school, all the way up to adults and older adults. And the proportion of respondents who chose mother and father was essentially the same throughout that whole, right up to the elderly. Their parents were still the heroes. So heroism is an important concept, and so it can be inspiring. You can get all sorts of great stuff on the internet about heroes and heroism. Why study heroes? Why should we even be concerned about heroes? Well, they're everywhere in our culture. We use that term all the time. Hollywood couldn't survive without the concept of heroism, heroic and the hero and all that kind of stuff. And also they're a great way to teach ideas. For example, if you want to teach the idea of nonviolent protest, you can talk till you're blue in the face about it as a concept or as a theory. And in a violent world, kids just don't get it. You mean you can change the world through nonviolent protests? How does that work? I don't believe it. You then teach them the life of Gandhi or King, and wow, the lights just come on in no time. They see how it works in the life of an individual. You're embedding the concept in a life. We used to teach heroes back in the early days of American public education. And we got away from that. We got more into systems and theories and concepts. And we don't teach heroes so much as we did back in the early part of the 20th century. I think we should get back to that more because that's a terrific way for kids to be inspired. You embody it in the life of Gandhi. Here's this little guy going around in diapers. I mean, he brought the most powerful empire in the world to its knees and drove it out of India. It's an unbelievable story. Look at what King did in this country. And so they can get a lot of good stuff online from that, and that's modeling, imitation. One of the most powerful forms of learning in the early years of life is modeling and imitation. And it goes on throughout the teen years as well, by the way. Al Bandura up at Stanford is the genius of modeling and imitation. And he has shown, and others have shown, the profound impact of a model, somebody you look up to. Right now, he's got serial dramas on television in Asia, in Africa, where models, using this idea of imitation and models to try to reduce HIV in those countries, and his results are spectacular. In fact, he is probably just through psychological means doing more to battle AIDS in Africa than anybody else. All came from some simple studies he did on modeling and imitation 30, 40 years ago. The bad. Well, you can get inspired by the wrong models, the wrong heroes, the anti-heroes. And there's something, we're always fascinated with the dark side. Why are we so interested in serial killers? Look at MSNBC. That whole cable channel after about 10 o'clock at night, all it does is have stuff about prisoners. Lockup, I think it's called, or something. It goes on for hours. Life inside the prison. We're fascinated with the dark side. Hey, Halloween embodies it, right? Anti-heroes. And so we are fascinated with that side of us. I think it's because we don't understand it. We don't know why it's there. There's a lot of research these days on the concept of evil. Evil is back in psychology. And Phil Zimbardo did this whole book, what's the name of his book? The Lucifer Effect. Right. why good people do evil things. Abu Ghraib, the Holocaust. Now, he has an extreme viewpoint with which I differ to some extent, but not all that much. But he says that any good person can be turned into an evil person through the environment, through all sorts of social forces, etc. I'm not convinced of that, by the way, but anti-heroes, wow, they're all over the place. And kids on the internet, they don't have well-developed crap detectors or moral filters to sort it all out. How do you know for sure if this person is an evil person as depicted in it? And the ugly, I think a good example of the ugly here, the Columbine killers. They were big Hitler and Nazi fans. And so they used to spend a lot of time online with all of the Nazi stuff. Well, if you just plug in the word Nazi online, you know, you could just go for a week with nothing but Nazi stuff. And who's the guy who killed, well, he didn't, but all his groupies, they killed Sharon Tate and... Well, you can find all sorts of stuff on him online, you know, and the whole dark side is extensively represented. It's an IQ test. Okay, social life. That's one of the big ones. We'll probably be talking a lot about that today. Kids' social life online. Certainly YouTube and MySpace and even Twitter and Facebook. These are all, in one way or another, social connecting technology. And kids are spending an incredible amount of their social life now online. So what are some good things there? Well, maybe your shy, socially phobic, introverted kid can find cyber company and friends online that they can't negotiate offline. That could be a good thing. We can all stay in touch with friends and others. If a friend moves, we can reconnect with old friends. Probably some of you have gotten an email from somebody who you haven't heard of for 30 years, and they found you online and they send you something. You remember the days when we did, and you're trying to remember those days, and maybe you're not remembering them so well. And, so that's, you know, that can be very good. There's no question about it. And it's interesting. Mediating our social life this way. I have a sister who met a guy online. She'd been divorced for a long time. She was lonely. She was living on an island off of British Columbia in a cabin in the mountains. You don't get more lonely than that. I would go and visit her as much as I could, but you know, I lived 3,000 miles away. And she was lonely, and she'd been divorced, didn't have any kids. There were a bear that would come by every once in a while and stuff. She went online, and she at one point had 5 guys. She was working these 5 guys, one of whom was an American from down in LA somewhere, another one was from Tel Aviv, Israel, and that's the world today. And this was actually 1998, by the way. And she begins to like this guy from Israel. Well, firstly, she's not Jewish, and she doesn't speak Hebrew, or, you know, and also he was Russian, and he didn't speak much English. So their communications were thin. But somehow or other, they really began to like each other a lot. And they ended up getting married. He flies from Tel Aviv to Victoria, British Columbia, and I'm his best man at the wedding. I fly up there, and she had never met him until February the 13th. How romantic. They got married on the 14th. And Valentine's Day. And they had never met physically. And they got married in 1998. As I said, I was best man. And they're still together. So that's an example of that whole social life and connecting. What's the bad? Well, posting personal information. We're studying, a student of mine, Catherine Stamoulis, is doing her doctoral dissertation. In fact, she'll have her final oral exam in a few weeks, on what is the kind of information that is highly risky to post, and who does it and why, etc., online. And if we get some time, we'll get to that, or maybe this afternoon, some of her results. Posting personal information. It's like you hit that send button and, some people just can't inhibit that move, because they've done all the work, they've got the photo and they've done this and they've done, and so on and so forth. And then, why waste all that time? So they hit the send button. There it goes. And for all time. And globally, all over the world. It's out there now. It's not like you're telling a friend at the next farm who you met in the town shopping, or somebody at your school. No, you're talking to the whole universe, and it lasts forever. You might remember the person who was on American Idol, and it looked like she was going to do very well and was very popular, and then all of a sudden a rumor started there was something on the internet. And there was, and it was her having sex with a guy on the internet. And it was totally graphic, no question about who it was. That worries me, because young kids loved it. American Idol is one of the few family shows, the family can get together and enjoy a good show. And that rumor started floating around about her, and, they discovered it was a horrendous, if any of you have seen the picture of her online, you don't get more graphic than that. It was oral sex online. And it was incredible. Well, sexting, kids send text messages that are sex, body parts, and sending this to other students in the school or friends and this and that and so on. And you might think it's fun and games, but it's also forever fun and games. Ruining a career, that's happened. Job prospects, employers these days are trolling the internet, looking for stuff concerning a prospective employee. They find something they don't like, that's over for you. That's it. Universities, some universities are now doing this. People who apply to the university, they're now going to check you out on the internet. So it's become enormously important that we're concerned about what kids know and what they do. And another thing too, a bad thing, is this constantly checking social networking sites. Kids are just constantly checking, has a new friend come on, or what's happening on their Facebook or their MySpace page and all this kind of stuff, and just constantly checking. Well, if you're constantly checking, is it possible that maybe you should be doing something else instead of constantly checking? And so there's a limited amount of time in this life. The ugly part of this one, we're all familiar with this: predators, online bullying, gossiping, lies that can lead to depression or worse, suicide, and vulnerable youth. You remember the famous case in St. Louis where the girl, these negative things were being said about her online, and she was 14 years old. She went upstairs and she hung herself. It was an important case because of the legal side of it, what could be done about it, because it turns out it was actually a mother of a friend of hers who was doing all these postings. It wasn't some guy, making negative comments about her at all. It was a mother. And finally, they were able to prosecute the mother. They weren't able to prosecute in St. Louis. They went to, I guess, MySpace in Los Angeles. I guess it's headquartered there, and so they were able to prosecute there. But law online is still a frontier. And so this is one of the things, to me, this one here is one of the things that concerns parents more than almost anything. We're all worried about our kids growing up healthy and moral and good and happy and with a wonderful life going forward. And this kind of stuff scares us all. Predators online, posting your picture, posting your name, or posting, God forbid, you post your address, your home address or a phone number, and this happens. And often the kids don't think it through. They're just having fun. And the bullying, the gossiping, it's, as I mentioned, the term flaming, and there are other terms related to this, but it just brings out, the internet does have this quality of bringing out some of the really bad stuff in the human condition. Snooping, investigating. Well, that's kind of fun. A lot of kids enjoy doing that. You're looking up stuff. We all do, don't we? Snooping, looking up stuff. Find out interesting things about others. You hear a rumor about, I don't know, some famous figure like a politician. There's a rumor. Elliot Spitzer. There's a rumor or something. And so you go snooping just out of ghoulish interest. So you can find out other things about others, and that's kind of fun. New student at school, checking out teachers. Any of you use Rate My Teacher? Any of you go to that site? Rate My Teacher. Kids can rate their teacher online, like high school students. It's kind of interesting. There's Rate My Professor also. And that's interesting. I often go there. I check out my fellow professors. Particularly if there's that little red pepper. See, if you're rated a hot professor, a little red pepper appears beside you. So I take a look to see if there's a red pepper by my name, firstly, and then if I see it beside someone else's name, I say, what's hot about them? I don't get it, you know, it's a generation thing, I guess. But it's very interesting, that kind of snooping, investigating, checking stuff out. We love all of this in our culture. Look at the success of magazines like People Magazine and Us and In Touch and Star and all that kind of stuff. Huge high circulation, even though many other magazines are having trouble. Apparently they're not. And gossip and all that. We're very interested in that. A lot of stuff on television to that. The bad. What if the snoopy finds out? What if you find out things you don't want to know or need to know? You know, about your own parents maybe, or friends, or neighbors, or relatives and stuff. And then maybe an ugly example would be just become obsessed with this sort of thing, obsessed with others. Some people have said we're obsessed with celebrity in America. I'm not certain, but we certainly have a lot of attention being paid to celebrity in this country. Self-expression, disinhibition, the global me. Well, the good part of this one is most people like to tell their story if they can. Everybody wants, in one way or another, wants to tell their story. The internet gives everyone voice. You don't have to be connected, you know, in some particular way. If you're going to tell your story 300 years ago, you had to be connected, typically. As historians point out, most of the great what we know from history is usually written by the wealthy or the powerful or the connected. Kings, folk like that, you know, they were connected, they were powerful. The ordinary folk had no way of doing that. And so their story was not told. There's a historian who these days spends most of his time trying to decipher everyday life from medieval times. And he has a heck of a challenge to find anything. And most of it, most of the comment about everyday life in medieval times was written by powerful people who weren't everyday folk. They were the upper social class people. Did they really understand ordinary folk? So he's trying to find anything left by ordinary people, any record at all by ordinary folk about what life was like. And the internet's going to change all of that. Going forward, the history of everyday folk will be told because it's going to be in the internet. Everybody is going to have access. The flat earth, you know, Friedman's concept of the flat earth, everyone's going to be equalized by the computer world, and so we can all get our story into the human record. So from the point of view of scholarship and how it might change our concepts of history, it's profound. But it would be a great challenge because of all the millions of information. The bad aspect here is, does this global platform increase narcissism? The global me. Does it attract, we have an opportunity, and therefore, often personality expression flows from opportunity. You may have certain personality qualities, but they really don't show very strongly in your life because you never had the opportunity for them to express themselves. And so we now have an incredible opportunity to be narcissistic. Is that going to bring is that going to increase the amount of narcissism and self-absorption in this culture? I think we're already going through a profound, almost tectonic shift at a deep level in self-revelation. I think we're revealing ourselves in dramatically greater ways than we ever did before. And there's all sorts of forces doing it. The internet clearly is one of them. People are expressing themselves, they're letting it all hang out, they're telling all sorts of stuff about themselves. Daytime television lives off of that idea. I call it the Jerry Springer effect. That guy can bring stuff out of people that's just astounding. They'll reveal their darkest secrets to the whole world, and they're all like that. Oprah and all of these are able to bring stuff out of people. Reality TV, that's the essence of reality TV. The whole idea is to get people to reveal themselves. You lock a bunch of people up in a house like a Big Brother, and you've got cameras going 24/7, and we, the viewer, are sitting watching it hoping something will happen. Someone's going to have sex, and we're going to see it, if we're lucky. Or someone's going to get mad at somebody, and there's going to be a fight, an argument. That's what this whole reality thing is. You drop cameras into everyday folk, and you follow them around, and try to... And so the self-revelation thing, it's almost I use the term disinhibition. It's almost a process of disinhibition in the culture that's being driven by all sorts of forces and factors. I have never seen in the history of this country the amount of self-revelation that goes on. Howard Stern can walk down the streets of New York. You might remember when he would do this. He'd get all sorts of people to take their clothes off. Even in cold weather. If it was me, I would probably just give him a mimeographed description. A photocopied description. But so the self-absorption, self-expression, disinhibition, the global me, how's that going to change kids, and how's it going to change the whole world? It attracts negativity from others. People then pile on. They attack you for the things you've said. You're stupid. You're this, that, and the other. And so your 15 minutes of fame becomes eternal. It's the longest 15 minutes. It brings out the wrong side of people, the put-downs, the negativity, the flaming, etc. So those are some of the negative things about the global me and the disinhibition. How about diversity? Expanding one's horizons. We're a very diverse society. I remember when CNN was founded back in the 80s, there was a lot of criticism that the world's first global network would be situated in America, Atlanta, Georgia. A lot of criticism of that. But I remember, I think it was like the president of Colombia, or Brazil, I think it was Brazil, was interviewed on this. And he said, what better country to situate the world's first international global network, because of the diversity level in America. And we're a very diverse culture. We have a very high diversity rate compared to many other countries. Would you rather that CNN was put in Sweden? I don't think so. So we value diversity enormously in this country, and the thing about the internet is, wow, what a source to learn about others, to communicate with others around the world, kids communicating, classrooms that are taking place all around the globe, kids connecting with kids in other countries, etc. And so there's so much to learn through the internet about other people, about how things might be different from your own community, about different religions, lifestyles, attitudes, beliefs, etc. The global village again, the other side of the mountain. But there's some bad things. You learn negative things about other people, other races, other nations. If you want to find a racist website, you can find it. If you want to find all sorts of very destructive websites, you can find them. You can find like-minded people who, if you hate certain groups of people or hate certain nations or have hate directed at something or other, you can go online and you can find, to use the old term, fellow travelers. You can find like-minded people there. And that's happening all the time. So you can learn hateful stereotypes. And the old confirmation bias again, it can confirm your own prejudices. And so it can validate your prejudice. You may have some prejudices, but they're hard to validate because the people around you don't believe that. They're not with you. Go online, you'll find all sorts of validation. You can validate any hateful viewpoint online. And so that's a problem with kids, with anybody. Entertainment. The internet's a phenomenal entertainment medium, obviously. There's something of interest for everyone, even babysitting, nannies, whatever. It's tremendously useful in the entertainment sense. And entertainment's not trivial. It's very important to have a happy, interesting life. Life is not all work. I hope it isn't. And there's got to be entertainment. I remember when the U.S. Department of Education was created by Jimmy Carter. And it goes way back, 1980. He created the Department of Education. We forget that it wasn't around all the time. And Shirley Huffstedler from California was the first ever Secretary of Education. She was an attorney from California. I was then president of an organization called the American Educational Research Association. That's the world's largest organization of researchers in education. So Jimmy invited me to the White House for the formal beginning of the Department of Education. And they had a poster. It was entitled, "Learning Never Ends." And that was the logo of the new Department of Education. And it was fun. And so I'm talking to the president, and I said to him, it's got to end sometime. I mean, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. Anyway, we had a very funny discussion about it. But, entertainment's enormously important. I never put it down. It enriches your life, makes life interesting. You can't always be all work and all learning and all the serious stuff. You got to have fun. And nobody on their deathbed, what's the old saying? Nobody on their deathbed ever said, I wish I'd spent more time on the business. Nobody ever says that. If you're on your deathbed, you're not going to say, I wish I'd spent more time at work. No. It's other things. Usually relationships, by the way, is the thing that comes to mind the most. Albert Einstein allegedly was asked, what's the most important thing in life? You might think he would say the universe, the cosmos, understanding all that stuff. No, it's alleged that he said relationships. The most important thing in life. So here you had the probably greatest scientific thinker of all time, and that's where his head was at. Of course, he had some problems with relationships. You might know that. He had an illegitimate child. We don't use that term anymore. But back in 1905, whenever it was, he had an illegitimate child. The woman lived in a different city. Albert Einstein's mother didn't like her, didn't want Albert to have anything to do with her. But finally, they ended up getting married, but it didn't work. They got divorced. He then married again, and so on. You wonder why his hair looked like that. So Albert Einstein had a lot of relationship problems himself. Entertainment, pornography. I I have some statistics here somewhere. Maybe I can talk about those later today, but an incredible percentage of websites are pornographic. I'm trying to remember, but I'll check it out. I think it's like 25% of websites or something are essentially porn websites. No, it's the number of visits, number of hits on websites, etc. is way up there, like maybe a third of all hits on the whole internet are on porn websites. And we all know about the profitability of the porn industry, despite Girls Gone Wild, that guy, and trying to get a bailout. Remember, you might remember that. A couple of the leading pornographers are asking for a federal bailout from the stimulus package. It gives new meaning to the stimulus package, I suppose. But they did. They actually wanted part of the bailout money. They don't need bailout. All of the data shows pornography is enormously profitable. Violence in entertainment. If we get a bit of time, we'll talk a bit about violence on the internet and what it might do. Attainable forbidden fruit. Parents can say they forbid fruit, right? We're all raised on the forbidden fruit idea in one way or another. But the internet, wow, it's like you can sneak into it. And how can you monitor all of this? It's highly engaging. So, a positive alternative to negative offline behavior. Is the internet a positive alternative for negative offline, quote-unquote, real-world behavior? It can be. The old phrase, it keeps you off the streets. Keeps you away from dangerous experiences. Philadelphia has an incredible homicide rate. Camden, New Jersey, right across the river, now is rated the 7th most violent city in the world. It's up there with Baghdad. It's an American city. Philadelphia has roughly 400 homicides a year in the city. I come from Canada, which has roughly half that. And Canada's got 40 million people, and Philly's got 1.2 million people. What's wrong with that picture? So 400 homicides, a lot of it street violence, street gangs, drug, a lot of drug stuff is a problem. Well, can we keep kids off the streets and away from such dangerous experiences? I mean, there are tens of thousands of abandoned buildings in a city like Philly, etc. Those big old, cities, the old crumbling buildings and stuff. And we know about the broken windows theory. We know about the problems of neighborhoods that go bad. It attracts crime, all that sort of thing. Well, does the internet keep kids off the streets, away from those things? Does it keep you at home, allowing for closer supervision? It should. If the kid's online on the internet, at home, on the computer, you're there, hopefully. And so therefore you can monitor and be on top of it better than if the kid's away somewhere. So that's a positive sign. Of course, kids, there are all sorts of ways around it. Kids can get around parental supervision. And here's a statistic that should worry all of us where internet use is concerned. According to the 2000 census, I think around about 47 or 48% of American families are headed by one person. And the trajectory, if you project that to the 2010 census, the family with two parents will become the minority family, statistically. That is a dramatic number in the history of America. And so the majority family, we think, based on projections, and the 2010 census will tell us this, may be headed by one person. In a bad economic situation, that one person may just be running on a treadmill to try to stay ahead of things. May have to have more than one job, etc. How can that one person also supervise closely kids' internet use? Can't do it. And with the handheld devices that some kids can get, how do you do it? And so we have some serious problems, and that's why all of us have to get on top of the internet and start demanding certain kinds of regulation, in my view, of this medium. So, some of the bad things. Positive alternative becomes worse than the negative offline behavior. Sort of what I was just saying. It's easier to bully online than offline because of anonymity. No fear of direct reprisal. You can also organize unacceptable offline behavior using online communications. You can bring together all sorts of people for bad things. Al-Qaeda does it. If they do it, we can expect that kids can do it, organizing bad things through online communications and the internet use, etc. The ugly. Videotape bad offline behaviors in order to post them online. We're all familiar with that. You remember the case of the girls who were beating up that one girl. They locked her in the house and they just beat the heck out of her. And they videotaped it and they posted it, I think, on Facebook or YouTube. It was YouTube, right. And I was asked by 2020 once to take a look at some of these things. They had, stuff like drive-bys where kids would drive by in a street, like a bus stop, and there might be some people, elderly people, let's say, at the bus stop or something, and the whole thing was to terrorize these folk and videotape it and then post it, just scaring people. And it's like Halloween gone wild, It's everywhere. And terrorizing people, stirring the pot, seeing what happens, laughing at it, what you do to people, etc. It's like one great big social psychological experiment that these kids are doing out there. And that can be very terrorizing for somebody at a bus stop. You don't know, maybe they're going to shoot you or something. And then you post it. And of course, if you surf YouTube, it's astounding, the stuff that's on there. Now, some of it is staged, obviously, and it's not real. Some of it is real. With handheld devices and cell phone cameras, we're recording everything that happens these days. And so it often gets posted. Well, that's my run-through of 10 basic psychological ideas and how they play out on the internet. And I had a few other things I just wanted to touch on. I wanted to spend a moment or two on video games. There are these massively multiplayer online video games that kids play online with people from all around the world. Those are phenomenal. I don't know if any of you have done any of those kinds of things, but they're extremely engaging for kids. Well, I just want to make a few points about video games. Violence in video games. The assumption is that violent video games, of which there are a lot, it's one of the big attractions of video games, is the violent content, unfortunately. So there's a raging debate in psychology and related fields about whether it leads to real violence. In my view, one of the best books of the last year, 2008, is called Grand Theft Childhood. Grand Theft Childhood. If you Google that, you're going to come up with some interesting stuff. It's written by Larry Kuttner and Cheryl Olson from Harvard, and it's a play on Grand Theft Auto, which is probably one of the most famous violent video games. Grand Theft Auto number 4, I think I might have mentioned it, appeared last year, and in just a few weeks had grossed $500 million. Well, it sort of makes sense that if kids play violent video games where they're shooting and killing and this and that, that might flow over into real violence. It's interesting that Kuttner and Olson say no, that it doesn't seem to be true. Now, one of the problems is there's not enough good research. If any of you are researchers interested in this area, this is one of the things we need is research into where game violence is studied in terms of real-world violence. Most of the studies are paper and pencil questionnaires, and so you give kids a video game and then you ask them to fill out a questionnaire. and then you conclude that it raised their level of aggression or reduced their level of aggression. But in a sense, that's not real aggression. The aggression that worries all of us is what's happening out in the streets or in the playground and so on. And so the research still is in infancy. And honestly, I don't think we know whether violent video games lead to real violence in the real world. And Cutler and Olson's conclusion in Grand Theft Childhood is that the best evidence tilts against that. So it may be that maybe there's some old catharsis theory, or there's all sorts of possible theories, but that the kids engaging in the violent video games, that's all the violence that they need, in a sense. There is evidence showing that most teenagers can make the distinction between fantasy violence and game violence and real violence. They make a very clear distinction there. And this is one thing, and this is a different thing altogether. The educational value of video games is really interesting. There's now research going on by educational researchers in 2 or 3 locations in the country looking at whether video games are a way of learning. And the thing is, so many kids are using video games. Therefore, shouldn't we as educators be using video games? I mean, this is something that turns them on. Should we be using the old-fashioned techniques, teacher talk, lectures, and so on? Or shouldn't we also be getting more into video games? And again, I mentioned earlier, there is some research suggesting that video games can lead to scientific thinking. It's in its infancy. But that you're in control of the situation, you have to make decisions along the way, you have to draw inferences about cause and effect, all of which are key scientific concepts. Causal inference, that kind of thinking. And so the argument is that video games actually inculcate that kind of thinking, and shouldn't we be looking more closely at them? Kids have been asked, I think I have another slide here, kids have been asked whether they would prefer books or video games as a basis for learning, and you can imagine it's overwhelmingly video games. MMORPG, that's massively multiplayer online role-playing games. Role-playing, very interesting online, where you can take a role that's different from yourself. And do kids learn something about themselves? We often learn about ourselves if we step out of ourselves into another role. And that's what these games often do. Second Life, you have an avatar. You can give this avatar all sorts of qualities and have that avatar play out his or her life online with all sorts of other avatars, etc. Is it a way of for young people, of sort of testing who they are, in a sense what they want to be, creating a life? Hey, we do it in Broadway plays, and we do it in the stage all the time in the movies. Here kids are doing it now in these MMORPGs games and on Second Life, etc. And we should be there as parents, as educators, as psychologists, and other professionals. We should be there. We should know what these are good for. And I think that education should be there. There's a rating system for video games. It's called the Entertainment, ESRB rating system. I won't go into the details on that. I could give that to you later. But the rating, the content, they rate it for these kinds of factors. And so it's like movies. We have R-rated, we have PG, we have PG-13, which is age 13 and up. My 13-year-old was very excited back in November when she turned 13 that she could now see PG-13 movies. And so she was able to see Benjamin Buttons, which led to some terrific discussions. There is a very interesting psychological movie, but she couldn't see Slumdog. So she was mad about that. Why couldn't she see Slumdog? Well, anyway, these are some of the rating content in video game ratings. And I think this is an important whole direction to take, to rate these kind of things. Video games are sort of discrete, and in a sense they got borders around them. You can do a rating on that, but rating the whole internet is a whole different enterprise. But they do things like alcohol content, blood and gore, cartoon violence, and you can debate some of these things too. Comic mischief, is that really worrisome thing? I don't know. I was raised on comic mischief, but I don't know. Crude humor, yeah, I could see that, I guess. Drug reference, fantasy violence, nudity or partial nudity, real gambling, and sexual content. Those are some of the main and key examples that they use in rating video games. And so down at the bottom is the system. EC3 is 3 years plus, and it goes all the way up to adult, which is AO 18 plus. So I think that's showing some degree of progress in this area toward getting on top of content and having some control over content. But on the broader internet, we're not even close. What do violent depictions do? Well, research suggests that there may be 3 broad categories of influence of violence in a depiction, like in a movie or television, etc. One is desensitizing. It's argued that it may desensitize us to violence. I was driving down the street in Philly. If you've ever been to Philly, the main street is Broad Street. It's an incredible thoroughfare. It runs for miles and miles and miles, right through the heart of the city. It's a big, broad avenue. Now it's full of crumbling houses and all that stuff, but it had to be beautiful 100 years ago. But anyway, so I'm driving down Broad Street, heading home from the university, and there's a shootout going on. So I'm driving along, and there's a female cop who's chasing somebody. She's got her gun out. She's running down the street. There's other cops. People are running all over the place and so on. Oh, I look at it through my little window. It's about TV size, you know, the window. Oh, yeah, look at that. Isn't that interesting? You know, and I just passed right on by, you know. You know, you see this kind of stuff. Violence in modern urban settings and so on. Anyway, desensitizing. Fear, anxiety inducing. It can make people afraid to go out of their apartment in the big cities at night. Anxiety producing. Fear. The uncertainty of life. The uncertainty of crime. Uncertainty is one of the biggest sources of human fear. It's the basis of a terrorist operation, to raise a level of unpredictability, so you simply don't know when they're going to strike or where. And that's what leads to this sense of terror and uncertainty and fear. Well, so violent depictions can raise fear, induce anxiety. And then finally, one that receives a lot of attention in the press and so on is imitating, learning. Do people learn stuff from violent depictions? There was a so-called Red Lake massacre up in Red Lake, Minnesota in 2005. Jeffrey Reese was a student at a tribal school in Red Lake, Minnesota, and he went to school and killed, I think, 8 of his fellow students, 7 or 8 of his fellow students. Apparently, one of his favorite movies was Elephant. Have any of you seen that movie? Gus Van Sant directed it. I say Gus Van Sant should be ashamed of himself. I mean, I keep coming back, why do people make these movies that you don't need to make, you know? I mean, he just did he was nominated, he did Milk. He directed Milk. But Gus Van Sant directed this movie called Elephant. It's about these 2 guys who plan to slaughter all their friends at school. It's right out of Columbine. Who needs this movie? We already knew about Columbine. Why make a movie? And apparently this kid, Jeffrey Reese, liked this movie and would look at this movie. And it was horrible. These kids plotting the slaughter of their friends, and they get these guns and so on, and they go to school. And as I remember it, one of them shoots, the first person that he kills is his friend, a very shy and quiet girl in the library, who was one of the only people who had befriended him in school. She gets it first. And horrible stuff. And I say to myself, Gus Van Sant, what's the matter with you, you know? Don't you? Anyway. So, learning, imitating, so that's one of the 3. I said I'd touch on addiction briefly. Is there addiction? Well, Here are some of the possible, this is especially, these criteria are especially applied to game playing. Salience, how salient is it in the kid's life? Mood change, do you see mood changes going on? Tolerant withdrawal symptoms, conflict, relapse. The thing about addiction, though, that's leading to a debate that's going on right now, and there are some serious scholars who say that they don't like the term internet addiction. It's too glib. Like, oh, a kid's spending a lot of time on the internet, they're addicted. Just like you can become addicted to alcohol or cigarettes and so on. The argument that some of these people are making is that addiction there may be comorbid factors. It may in fact be reflecting something else, underlying depression, underlying anxiety of some sort, and we should be going for those things, not for in fact, the addiction, the extreme time spent on the internet may be a way of coping with the underlying problems. Now, I find that an interesting argument, because some people in the internet world have just leaped on this thing, internet addiction, and maybe it's misplaced, and we should be looking at what leads kids into this excessive use of the internet. We often over-pathologize. We're all familiar with that. The DSM system of the beloved American Psychiatric Association is like a growth industry. We just keep creating new disorders. And pretty soon there'll probably be a disorder called the, creating disorders disorder. And it just goes on and on. And it's astounding if you take a look at the growth of disorders and terminologies. And now we've got, like, sex addiction. I don't know, I'm not certain sex addiction even exists. But it's so glib to use that term addiction and apply it to extreme behavior. We have continuums of human behavior. You can be an introvert or, on the other end, an extrovert. It's a continuum of human behavior. You can have a continuum of internet use from 0 all the way up to extremely high use. Is that a disorder, or is it simply an extreme expression of in a sense, normal continuum? And I think that applies to a lot of the things that we claim are disorders. It's like the overdiagnosis of ADHD, which is a scandal. I think it's psychological malpractice. The relentless overdiagnosis of certain things, like ADHD. It's sexist, it's usually boys, and so on. And often you get kids who are on a continuum of in a sense, hyperactivity and off-task, are at one extreme. Do we then slap a label on them, a stigmata? Or does we treat it as an extreme expression of a human continuum? And we wouldn't have survived if we didn't have these ranges of human behavior. And we need people who, at this end, we need people in the middle, and we need people at the other end. I study thrill-seeking. It's the biggest thing I study. And we have people who are, and risk-taking, people who are totally risk-averse, never take risks. People at the other end who take risks all the time. Is it a disorder? No. People look at some of these world-class risk-takers and say they're nuts. They're crazy. They're not. In fact, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have created the modern world. They're the ones who are over looking on the other side of the mountain. They're going to do all these extreme things. But we couldn't all be that way. It would be chaos. So we need people in the middle, and we need the people who are risk-averse also to keep things stable and so on. So I have serious concerns about the term addiction and its overuse. It's a glib kind of concept in my view. Well, let's see if there's anything left here on my... one of the questions was, and you may want to note this one, one of the questions that I was given to think about for my presentation was how children are navigating all of the technological worlds online. That's a huge question. There's a huge study that you can access called the MacArthur Foundation Study 2008. They did a huge study of kids. They followed them up over time. How much internet use they did, all sorts of implications of that in their lives. And so I'd refer you to the MacArthur Foundation study. And then some helpful websites. There are lots of helpful websites. There are also lots of bad websites. But connectsafely.org is a very helpful website. It's directed toward tweens and teens. And it's all about posting personal information, social networking, cyberbullying. It's a good one. There are ways, of trying to filter and monitor internet use. Kids can get around them, by the way. But Microsoft.com/protect has got good information on using filters and monitors with your kids. But again, keep in mind that, kids can get around this stuff without too much difficulty. But on that site, they also have contracts about rules for internet conduct that parents and kids can sign. And there's not good science to say whether signing a contract with your child about internet use works any better than signing a contract with your kid about sex, abstinence, etc. There's more research on the sexual abstinence by far than there is on this contract. But it's worth exploring, I think, for some parents to consider this idea of a contract. So I think, and then a very important thing is this, what I call the cyberspace sit-down. Parents have got to be in touch with their kids. They have to be talking about this. They've got to know all of the websites. They should, if possible, have their kids' passwords and be able to go to their kids' MySpace page. And I think this is bottom line. Parents have to have all that information so that they can check up on their kids. And so a cyber sit-down, the old birds and the bees stuff, also for sex, I don't think that works anymore. The kids know more about it than you do. So I think the big thing there is to talk to them about it in terms of online, the things that would worry you about their exposure online. And so I call it cyber sit-down. And I think I'll end on that note. Thank you very much. Should we take a couple of minutes, just break, or?
No. We're gonna, no, excuse me, no.
Go right now? Okay.
We got 1 hour.
Okay.
We got 1 hour.
Our next speaker. Our next speaker is Lori Getz. Since 2004, Lori has worked as an instructional technologist in Los Angeles. She has a Master of Arts in Educational Technology from San Diego State and is certified by iSafe.org as an Internet Safety Specialist. In September, Lori founded Cyber Education Consultants and began speaking to students, parents, and educators about Internet safety, security, and ethics. Since that time, Lori has reached out to dozens of schools and communities, speaking to thousands of interested Internet users. Her mission is simple: to help bridge the gap between a young generation of digital natives and their parents and teachers. Recently, Lori became involved with the launching of Safety Kid on the Net, an elementary school curriculum publication, as the author of the program. She is also in the process of launching an online library of video tutorials as part of her Parent Resource Center project. Lori is a mother, aunt, and teacher. Much of her insight has come from her work with children, tweens, and teens in both her personal and professional life. Lori is grateful for the opportunity to bring her perspective on cyber education to the Calciano Youth Symposium. I welcome Lori.
Thank you. That was really terrific. Should I turn it on? Let's see if I can turn it on. You have to be smarter than the technology, right?
Try. Could be muted.
Okay.
I've got a red light. Perfect. Thank you. Hi, thank you all so much for staying. I really appreciate the fact that I got to listen to Dr. Farley speak before I got up here because, where are you, Dr. Farley? You posed some wonderful questions that I now get a chance to answer some of them and talk a little bit more about some of the topics that you brought up. Your last slide about the cyber sit-down is really my focus, and I'd like to just tell you a little bit how I got to where I am today. In 2004, I got a phone call. I was sitting in my office at an independent school in Los Angeles. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the middle school director called me and said, "Are you watching Oprah?" I said, "I'm sorry, you just called me in my office. No, I'm not watching Oprah, are you?" And he said, "No, but you need to go find a TV and turn it on." So I went, I found a TV, this was 2004, and Oprah was interviewing a young man. He was 17 years old, and he had become the #1 internet porn star. Did you see this? The New York Times also did an expose on this young man. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, I'm sorry. So I sat down to watch this, and now I have a master's in technology, but in 2004, I was floored. I had no idea that this was going on. This young man was now 17, but when he was 13, back in 2000, he got a laptop with a webcam. You know what the webcam is, right? The camera that streams video that now every computer comes with. All right, he had a laptop with a webcam, and late at night, after his mom went to bed, he was streaming video. He was having video chats with total strangers. And at 13, he was very vulnerable, and a man got online with him and said, "If you take off your shirt and just sit there in your boxers, I'll give you money." And he thought, well, that's kind of like being in a bathing suit, so sure, why not? 4 years later, this young man had made over $1 million taking his clothes off over the internet. So we realized in 2004 that we had no idea what was going on in the internet, but the kids did. They knew all of this. They were in chat rooms. They already had MySpace pages. Facebook wasn't around yet, really, not for the younger kids. And they were using all of this technology, and we were totally behind. So at the school that I was at, they said, "You know what, Lori, I want you to spend the next 3 months, and the only thing you are going to do is learn everything you can about the internet." And if anyone was looking at my log history during that time, you would have thought I was the scary internet predator. I was in chat rooms. I created my first MySpace page. I was everywhere you could possibly imagine. And it was very eye-opening. And what we realized was that we were playing this terrible game with the kids, and it was really very unfair. We were giving them all of this technology and saying, "Here you go out there and use all the technology because you understand it better than we do." And then when they make a mistake, we go, "You can't do that. Gotcha." No one told them the truth about the internet. No one explained to them that everything was public and everything was permanent. No one was giving them the tools that they needed in order to make responsible decisions. So we developed at the school that I was at this cyber education program. And it has evolved over the last 5 years. It used to be all about internet predators, right? Dateline did those 12,000 episodes of To Catch a Predator. You saw those? Right. That's where it started. But now, it's not just about internet predators. Believe me, they still exist. I've been working with the FBI Internet Crimes Against Children, that department, for the last several years, and predators still exist. But we are also seeing the kids get in their own way because they don't understand what their responsibility is. So we need to help bring this education to them. And since September, I have been at over 32 schools all across California, and I have spoken to thousands of parents and students and teachers because it is important we give them this education. Not just talk about all the terrible things out there, not just say, "You know what, I'm going to close my eyes because I don't really understand this, so you kind of figure it out." No, we need to work together. It's a partnership. And that's what I'm going to be exploring today. Let's start with the digital native. Dr. Farley, you mentioned this. I want to explain a little bit more about what the digital native is, and I'm going to start by telling you a quick story. I was with a parent a few weeks ago, and she told me that her kindergartner had to write a sentence about what he did over the weekend, and he wrote, "We went to the park," but he wrote "we," W-I-I. True story, I swear. This is the digital native. They have never known a world without technology. It is intuitive. It is so intuitive to them. It's as intuitive to them as turning on a light switch is to us. They just get it. My 2-year-old can change the wallpaper on my mother's cell phone, and my mom can't change it back. I get a call weekly, Charlotte, change the wallpaper. How do I fix it? My 2-year-old. They are wired differently. The research that is coming out of major universities, including Stanford and UCLA, is telling us that this young generation of digital natives, of internet users, their brains are wired differently because of the technology in part. They move at twitch speed. Everything has to be fast. How many parents do I have in here? Okay, yes. Do you see this? That they need everything right now. They do not want to wait for any of it. We move at conventional speed. It's why we're okay using email and they're not. Teenagers are using IM, right? And we use email. Because for us, it's okay if we send an email and 3 days later we go back to check and see if we got a response. That's not okay for them. They want to know. I had one student just this week tell me that if it takes someone more than 10 minutes to respond to an instant message, he's offended. What could be more important than responding to what he had to say? They like random access. Dr. Farley, you mentioned Wikipedia. I happen to really like Wikipedia, and yes, I agree that Wikipedia is not always the most reliable source. However, the scientific community has said that Wikipedia is more reliable than the Encyclopedia Britannica because there is a larger group. You disagree. I know you disagree. I understand. But there was just an article that came out last year that was talking about that there is a large group that they are watching everything that is, not everything, they're watching as much as they can. But I understand that it is not always reliable and valid. I had a student when I was at Brentwood School in Los Angeles. I think it's okay for me to say where I was. I was at Brentwood School in Los Angeles, and I had a student who thought it was funny to constantly change the history of Brentwood School. He wasn't doing anything really terrible. It was just that it started in a different year and the population was different than what it was because he wanted to see if people were actually paying attention to the details. And I found this so interesting because what it said to me is that the kids are actually seeking out information, that they like to be part of the learning process, that they want to gather the information for themselves. Everything needs to be fun. Everything needs to be highly graphical. It's why the internet speaks to them the way that it does. In fact, I had to change all of my math lessons to Jeopardy games in order to keep their attention. It's hard as an educator because you're right, Dr. Farley, we are competing against the internet. And we do need to become better performers. We need to be more engaging. We also need to start accepting that this is the way of the world today. Not that it's the way of the world, it's not the future. It is the way of the world today. And we almost need to embrace it and understand it so we're not afraid of it, so we're not battling it. So I want to look at some of that today. Okay, so yes, we are digital immigrants. I call us the generation of the did you get my email phone call. You've done this. See, you're laughing. I know you've done this. You send the email because we're not digital dinosaurs. We use technology, but we don't trust it the same way the kids do. We will pick up the phone and say, did you get my email? It's okay. It is okay that they know more than we do. What's not okay is that we take a step back and say, because you know more, we are not going to be involved. That's where we need to start making a shift. Does this look familiar to anybody, those of you who have teenagers? I have 2 instant messaging conversations, 2 IM conversations going on. At the same time, I have Facebook open, and there's some homework on top of it. This is their idea of multitasking, and because I am talking to a group of professionals, I know you all know that multitasking doesn't actually mean doing lots of things at the same time. That's not what multitasking is. Multitasking is switching between tasks very quickly, right? Okay. So, we constantly say to the teens, and the tweens, and the children, to all of them, you can't multitask. Turn everything off. You need to focus on your homework because you can't multitask. Guess what? That's not true. Well, don't throw things at me. Let me finish the statement. It's not totally true. Because when you say you can't multitask, they're going to say, let me show you, and have 6 IM conversations while watching TV, texting, and changing their iTunes playlist. That's multitasking to them. And it is switching between tasks very quickly. What they can't do is they can't process higher order thinking while multitasking. Multitasking is really very quick distractions, right? And when we talk to them about multitasking, we just say, you can't multitask. And they say, yes, I can. But that's not what we need to be talking to them about. We need to talk to this generation about how, yes, I know you can have 6 IM conversations while texting, changing your iTunes playlist, and have me yell something at you from across the room, but you need to turn those things off while you are trying to focus on something that takes a little bit more brain power. That these linear progressions are being lost because they are engaging different parts of their brain while they're multitasking. So it takes them sometimes, and I ask them this question. I work with a lot of these kids, and I will say to them, can you multitask? And they will all say, absolutely, yes. And then I ask them, while you're doing these 16 other things and your homework at the same time, have you ever had to read the same passage 6 times before you actually understand it? That's the multitasking you can't do. So I challenge them to try it differently. I'm not telling them they can't multitask, but here's what I'd like to see happen. Try it your way one night and my way another night. Take 30 minutes and just turn everything off and focus on your homework. Just do 30 minutes, then take a break, because they do feel this need to be connected all the time. And that is a totally different issue that I will let Dr. Farley discuss, because why do they need to feel connected all the time? Why is it so difficult for them to turn off the IM, to turn off the cell phones, to close down their Facebook pages? Why can't they disconnect? There's more going on here than the technology. There's some behavioral issues going on. But give them 30 minutes to focus on their homework, let them take a break, reconnect, and then turn it off after 15 minutes and go back to the homework and see if they're more efficient. Most of the time, they find for themselves that they are more efficient in that process. I do get kids, though, sometimes that will tell me, you know what, it's too hard for me to turn everything off because I'm wondering what I'm missing. And so just to have the IM open, that's easier for me. They need to start to learn how they work best. And we need to start to understand how to talk to them about figuring that out. While they're doing all these things, they always get so scared when I put up the slide. While they are doing these things, while they are socializing, while they are using IM, Facebook, email, texting, forums, blogs, wikis. You guys know forums, blogs, and wikis. Forums are online bulletin boards, blogs are online journals, and wikis are like Wikipedia, where anyone can add anything to like a dictionary or encyclopedia. While they're doing these things, who's watching? What do you guys think? Who's watching? I can't hear you. Speak up. Who's watching? The world. Pretty much. And hackers, okay? This is who's watching. I want to talk about a few of these. Moderators and websites. This is something the kids do not understand at all. When they send an email, an IM, or a text message, it is not private. It is not just between them and the person they send it to. It's between them, the person they send it to, anyone who has then forwarded that message, okay, all of the friends. There was actually, I was watching the Today Show. Did anyone see the Today Show this morning? There was a young girl who committed suicide recently because she sent a sexting message to her boyfriend. She sent a nude photo of herself through the cell phone, and he then distributed it to other people. He was 16 years old. And this weighed on her so much that she recently committed suicide. These things aren't private. Moderators and websites can access your email, your IMs, your text messages, and they store them and they save them forever. Facebook just got in a whole lot of trouble a few weeks ago because somebody finally picked up on the fact that they were saying this in the terms of service. This was not news to me. They have always owned everything that you post on their site. It was that there was a case where someone created some artwork, and because of Facebook's terms of service, it made it so that Facebook actually owned the artwork. And that's where they crossed a line. But if you still read the terms of service for Facebook, for Gmail, for AOL, for any of those things, they tell you they are providing you with a service. We don't even pay for it. Who pays for these things? Advertisers, right. So when I was on my Gmail account and I sent an email to a friend of mine in Colorado that said, I can't wait to see you in a few weeks in Colorado, and the next time I opened my Google account, there were ads for IKEA in Colorado. It reminded me that I am not alone out there, that somebody is seeing these things. Now, the kids always say, who's going to sit there and read all the messages? No, it's not a person. It's a machine that's picking up keywords, and then they are using that to match advertisers with the users so they can do direct marketing. It's a fabulous way to capitalize on the internet, but it makes it public and not private. There's tracking software. Parents are looking at these things. Employers, universities. The Wall Street Journal put out an article last year that said of 200 universities, I think it was 86% admitted to checking Facebook and MySpace pages for potential applicants. They didn't say how they were doing it, so I called some of my friends at the universities, because I work with a lot of admissions counselors, and I said, how are you doing this? Are you hacking in? Because that's what the kids are afraid of. The kids mark these spaces private and then expect them to be private, and that's not the case. The universities are not hacking in. They are sending out recruiters into Facebook, saying, I'm a recruiter from Columbia. I don't know if it's Columbia. I didn't talk to them, but I'm just using them as an example. I'm a recruiter from Columbia, and I'm interested in learning more about you. If you have any questions, please send me a message through Facebook. And then the kids friend them, and now they're in. And the universities are saying if they can't get in, they're wondering why not. The students don't know what to do with this information. They try and start cleaning up their Facebooks, but there's this, I always get this question, isn't that an invasion of privacy? When you post something on the internet, you give up all rights to privacy. And they need to understand this so that they can make more responsible decisions about the things that they're doing. Friends are seeing these things. How many of you have a Facebook account? Oh, good. That's a good amount of you. Great. On Facebook, there's something called a news feed. And what that news feed does is it tells you when somebody updates their status or posts something to somebody else's Facebook page. So just recently, my cousin, who is 13 years old, received a video message from one of his female classmates, and it was posted on his wall, which is the public place of Facebook. I got a news feed that told me that somebody posted something to his wall. So I went and took a look at it. I thought, oh, what a cute, maybe it's a birthday message or something like that. Okay, if this young girl had any idea there was an adult looking at this video, I don't think she would be very happy. She had no idea that she was posting it in such a public place, that it wasn't just going to be she and her friends who saw it, but then those friends' friends, and their friends, and their friends, and so on and so forth. When you post pictures on the internet and you tag them, who knows what tagging is? Tagging is when you label a picture. But tagging, in my world, as a programmer and a coder, means that I am adding a label to something so people can find it. It becomes a searchable term. That's what a tag is. So when kids are tagging photos on Facebook, they are actually making those photos searchable. They don't realize this. Facebook finally figured this out and said, oh, we'll add a security feature so Google can't search these photos, these tagged photos. But that just happened a couple of months ago. All the pictures that have already been tagged are already in Google search images. And if the person who's tagging you does not have their privacy settings set correctly, you will still be found on Google search image. A former student of mine did not get a job last June because of old pictures on his MySpace page. He posted inappropriate pictures in 2003, went off to college in 2004, took the page down in 2005, but because those pictures were tagged in 2008, they resurfaced when an employer went looking for him in Google. I don't know how fair I think any of this is, I have to admit, because I know as a teenager I made some mistakes, didn't always make the best decisions, but I was not immortalized on YouTube or on Facebook. And our teens and tweens and children today are not afforded that same luxury, and they need to be aware of it. I'll talk about hackers in a little bit. So, do you believe me that the truth about the internet is nothing is private and everything is permanent? Okay. I call this my father's famous four. See if you recognize them. Do these questions look familiar to you? What are you wearing? Where are you going? Who are you going with? Have I met these friends? And what time will you be home? I never got to leave the house without answering these 4 questions. When I talk to parents, I understand that there is this fear when it comes to the internet because we were not parented in this realm. How many of us were asked these questions as kids? Now, how many of you ask your children these questions? Right, because we were parented in the physical world, and so therefore we know how to parent our children now. But because the cyber world didn't exist, some of us are paralyzed by fear that we don't know what we should be asking. So here's what they translate to. What are you wearing translates to, what's your screen name? They've got screen names all over the place, and these screen names will stay with them forever. I once had a student create the screen name Predator because he thought it would be funny to harass the other girls in his class. That screen name, though, was attached to an online profile. How many of you have an online profile? Okay, do you have email? Online banking? Raise your hand. Shopping? Okay, you all have online profiles. Anytime you create any kind of account online, you create an online profile. And in doing that, you usually create a screen name and set up a password, right? So the screen name is attached to your personal information. It's attached to your first name, your last name, your address, your credit card information, whatever it is you choose. So when my student created this screen name, he forgot that he was attaching it to his real name. And he will now forever have these 2 things linked. I had another student who was using her Yahoo account on her college applications, and her address, her email address, was hotbabeinla@yahoo.com on her college applications. They're not thinking these things through because to them, the internet is all about them and it's private. And none of these things have consequences because nobody has told them about the consequences. So we should know, we should be asking our youth, what are your screen names? How are you presenting yourself to the entire world? Who can define the internet, the actual definition of the internet? Does anyone want to try? Putting you guys on the spot. Okay, I won't put you on the spot, I'll just tell you. So the definition of the internet is a system that connects every online device together, every computer, every mobile device, every PSP, DS, whatever it is they're using, iTouch. The internet is the system that connects them all together. So when your kids get on the internet, it is like walking out the front door into the entire world. That's what it is, because everything is connected. So there are lots of places to go and lots of people to meet. Would you let this generation of young people walk out the front door of your homes without asking them where they're going? No, we don't do that. We ask questions, which is why we need to be asking them what sites they're on. I can't tell you how many parents I talk to that say, I can't ask my child that. I can't look at their history. They clear their history before I can get to it. Why not? Why can't we ask this question? What sites are you on is the same as where are you going. If we don't let them walk out the front door of our homes and not ask them where they're going, we should not be letting them walk out into the entire world and not ask them where they're going. With young children, they may be going to places they don't even realize are potential hazards, like Google. You can't even Google Harry Potter and not come up with something that would be inappropriate for a 3rd grader. Try it. You should know where they're going. You should help them understand that there are places that are meant for younger kids, there are places that are meant for older kids, there are places that are meant for adults. And they need to understand that this is just like walking out the front door into the entire world. If you guys are curious and you want to know more about checking history and not allowing kids to clear history and things like that, you can ask the question and I will answer it at the panel. Who are you going with and have I met these friends translates to who's on your buddy list, do you know them personally, meaning in the physical world. I've been working with the FBI SAFE team. I'm not FBI. The kids always think I'm FBI. I am not FBI. I've just been lecturing with the FBI SAFE team for several years, helping to bring this education to parents and students. And I was with one of my agent friends last week, and he was telling me some things that really upset me. But I feel like I need to share some of the ugly with you as well. Buddy lists are really important in knowing who your kids, this generation, these young people, who their friends are, and that they are not making friends with people on the internet that they don't know. And the truth is adults shouldn't be doing it either. It's not just a problem for kids. What my friend at the FBI told me recently is that predators are now grooming adults and not children, because it takes too long to groom one child at a time. So instead, they are grooming adults that have access to large groups of children. So let's say that you are a teacher, for example, and you have a class, and you're having an issue. So you get online and you go to a teacher's network, to a teacher's forum, and you post a question. You want to know how to teach a certain subject, how to really motivate the kids, and you get a response from somebody, "Hi, I'm also a teacher, I'm nearby in your area, I'm an expert in this, and I'd be happy to talk you through it." Well, now, after talking for a few weeks, you know what, if you'd like, I'll just come to your class, and I will help you. And now you bring this total stranger into your classroom, and you are introducing them to a classroom full of kids, and the kids are going to trust this adult because you trust the adult. The webcams are also another one, where you now have, it used to be that we were really worried about predators in chat rooms because they were pretending to be somebody that they were not, and so they were saying they were young, they were trying to connect with the kids. Now with the webcams, kids are starting to feel more secure, saying, well, if I video chat with somebody, I'm going to be able to see them, and so therefore it's not going to be a problem, because if he says he's 17 years old, then I know he's 17, or she says that she's 15 years old, I know she's 15. Well, recently, there was a case where there was a 17-year-old boy who was connecting with a 13-year-old girl. They originally met on MySpace, and then they started video chatting, because on MySpace he saw her profile and he said, "Oh, I think you're really pretty, I think you're really special, I'd like to get to know you." This was a 12-year-old who was looking for more attention online, and so she started video chatting with him, and he was a 17-year-old boy. And so he convinced her, because now they're in a relationship, to start taking her clothes off and to doing things that were sexually explicit over the webcam, and she did. What she didn't know is that this 17-year-old was streaming the video live someplace else for a room full of predators to watch. Then the predators were capturing the video, gets worse unfortunately, were capturing the video and then emailing the young girl saying, "I have this video of you. If you do not do things for me over the webcam, I will expose you to your friends and to your parents and to your school." Those are the really ugly stories. However, if the kids today know not to engage in online conversations with strangers, then we're not going to run into these issues. It is when they don't have a clear picture of the whole story that they start to get themselves in trouble. Video chatting, I video chat with my niece, and she's in Las Vegas, and so she and I will get on the webcam, and sometimes we'll watch American Idol together. There's nothing wrong with that. I know lots of teenagers who use the webcam for study sessions, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. They'll pull up several webcam sessions, and they'll sit there and they won't really talk to each other until one of them has a question. Then they can look up into the camera and they can engage in a conversation with one another. It's just like when I used to sit at the coffee shop with my girlfriends and we used to study together. This is their new way of doing it. But it's not just strangers with the webcams that we need to be concerned about, because kids do sometimes, even friends, they make mistakes. And they will convince each other to do things over the webcam that they wouldn't necessarily do face-to-face. I call it anonymous exhibitionism. That for some reason they feel more anonymous when they've got that screen in front of them, and so therefore they're now willing to do things over the webcam they wouldn't do face-to-face. In Los Angeles, there was a case where a group of boys convinced a group of girls to flash them over the webcam. They were both at sleepovers, and the boys took pictures. They snapped pictures of the girls doing that. The girls didn't know, and the boys made a book out of it and tried to sell it. And now those boys are pending prosecution for child pornography. So these are things they need to understand. They need to know about the online stranger danger. They need to know what their friends could possibly do. They need to understand how to make good decisions about their online use. It helps when you know who those friends are and who they're talking to. The last one here, what time will you be home, translates to how often are you online, and is it for school or for fun? This goes back to the multitasking issue I was talking about a while ago. We're starting to see more and more kids talk about how they're overwhelmed and they're stressed about homework and they can't get everything done. And I think it's an important question that we ask. Well, what is happening online while you're trying to get your homework done? What's causing some of these stressors? What's causing some of these problems? So asking them about their multitasking is also a good thing to keep in mind. We want to make sure that we understand their language. Has anyone ever visited netlingo.com? It is a great website. Highlight, circle, put a star by this. It is something that as adults we all need to do because for some reason we need to learn the language that they just know. But netlingo.com has top 50 acronyms that teens use, texting, and on IM. So, you see the totally percent sign? We're not talking about math homework here. The percent sign represents being drunk. LOL is laugh out loud. Who knows what PAW is? I've got some young people in the front here. What's PAW? Parents are watching. Anyone care? LMAO. Laughing my ass off. The more adult version of LOL. It's important that we understand this language, and it's also important that we start to not necessarily use this net lingo because your kids will laugh at you if you do and probably call you lame. However, I have seen where sending an IM to a child, it really kind of freaks them out a little bit. When you send them an IM, it's time for dinner. What, did mom just send me an IM? Yes, I did. Now come downstairs for dinner. But when we can enter their world and begin to understand it, not necessarily using their lingo, but using their technology, it brings them back to us. We are seeing that the face-to-face communication skills are starting to drop off. And this is problematic. I see this when I've got my niece and my nephew sitting next to each other on the couch, texting each other. They're more comfortable. When I asked my nephew to go call grandma to make sure that she's on her way, he said, I'll just send her a text message. No, go pick up the phone and actually call her. Your grandmother would really appreciate hearing your voice. We need to start to bridge that gap. We need to accept the fact that yes, they are texting, and sometimes we need to text to get their attention to bring them back to our world. We need to make sure that we are giving them opportunities to do both. Use the technology that they're so comfortable with, but also engage in the face-to-face communication that is so vital to developing relationships with others. It's about the developmental age, not a chronological age. I am asked this question probably more than anything else. At what age should my child get an email, IM, YouTube, or Facebook account? This is the question I get most often, but you have to remember that I'm working with parents for the most part, and they want to know what to do because they're unsure. It is not a chronological age. I cannot say, well, I can say for Facebook you have to be at least 13, and MySpace you have to be 14. Those are not my rules, those are their rules. YouTube, you have to be able to go into contract. I actually think it's 13 with a parent and 18 on their own. Google, by the way, has an age limit. Do you guys know this? Everyone uses Google. Every teacher I've ever talked to in second grade, they're using Google. However, they're not supposed to be. It's a little unclear what that age is because in their terms of service, it says that they need to be able to enter into a binding agreement. So Google has not necessarily stated what age they have to be, but what does that mean? At what age should my child have an email, IM, YouTube, or Facebook account? This is my answer. When they're ready for it. And after you've used it. This is really important. How do you know how to have a conversation about the good, the bad, and the ugly? Thank you very much for that. The good, the bad, and the ugly of Facebook if you've never used it. How can you say to your 13-year-old, you're not ready for this, but I don't know why? That answer is not going to fly. But if you can say to them, you're not ready for this because I don't think you understand how public all of this is and what the news feeds are doing, and can you tell me about tagging photos? No, you can't. You're not ready. We need to learn about this together first. When they can show you that there are reasons that they need it, that they want it, how they're going to use it responsibly, what the possible risks are, and how to avoid them. What they don't realize is that they are in total control over a lot of this. They don't ever have to meet an online predator. All they need to do is keep as much personal information to themselves as they can and off the internet, and not talk to strangers. I had a 10-year-old come up to me and say, I really want an email account, and my mom said no. And I said, well, that is a little strange. I usually see 10-year-olds with email accounts. So I called, the mom came in, and I said, okay, please explain this to me. What's going on that you don't want your 10-year-old to have an email account? And she looked at her son and said, if a stranger walked up to you in a park and offered you a free video game if you went home with him, what would you do? And he said, I would go. Yeah, he's not ready for email. It's about a developmental age and how mature they are and what they understand. How responsible are they going to be? With young children, they should never be left alone at the computer by themselves, because they are one click away from seeing something that could very well, I don't know, damage their psyche. I'm not sure. But it's really important that young children are not at the computer alone. There's a lot of inappropriate content that we do not want them to be exposed to, and they're one click away. Now, is that going to work with a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old? Absolutely not. We need to apply the same parenting skills we apply in the physical world. That as they get older and become more responsible, we give them more freedom. I want to talk a little bit more about the monitoring, filtering, and securing your computer. Dr. Farley, you touched on this, and I agree with you that kids can absolutely get around the parental controls. I have to share this story with you. So a girlfriend of mine called me. This was several years ago. She called me and she is screaming at the top of her lungs, my husband, I am going to kill him. He has been looking at pornography online and has racked up thousands of dollars on our credit card because of it. And she's so angry, and I said, I don't know why you're calling me. Go call your husband and yell at him. And so she said, okay. So she hangs up the phone. She goes and she calls her husband, and he says, I swear it wasn't me. Someone must have stolen our identity. And so she called me back and she said, he's not admitting it, and I don't understand how this could possibly happen. Well, she had a 10-year-old at the time. He's now 14. And so I said, did you go and ask your son if he knows anything about this? And she said, he's 10 years old and we have parental controls on the computer. There's no way he could have done this. I said, you've got a really smart kid. I know him pretty well. You need to go ask him. So she did, and he broke down in tears and admitted that, yes, it was him. What happened was he was using Microsoft Word, and he typed in www.sex.com, and when he hit enter, it became a hyperlink. And he was able to click on the hyperlink and bypass the parental controls his parents currently had on it. By the way, the parental controls that he was using have since been fixed, and this is no longer an issue. But 4 years ago it was. So he was able to get past it. But what happened from there was much worse, because he got to this site and now he had no idea what to do with this information, because no one had ever really talked to him about inappropriate content, things he should look at. He was really afraid that if he told his mom that he had done this, that she was going to take the technology away. And that is such a huge fear for kids. There was a study just done at UCLA that talked about cyberbullying, and it said that 3 out of 4 students had been cyberbullied in 2008. And most of them reported not telling their parents for fear their parents would take away the technology. So they're not talking to their parents. And this little boy did not talk to his mom. So once he got into the site, he started surfing around. He went and took her credit card, entered the credit card number, and now was able to access lots of different things, and didn't realize that every time he went to a new site, it was charging the credit card again. Well, the next month, he was grounded, by the way, forever. You know what, George, could I get a little bit of water? Is there? Thank you. Excuse me. The next month, when my friend got a credit card bill, now there were a whole new set of charges. Well, her son had been grounded and was not allowed to go anywhere near the computer, and so she didn't understand what happened. But what she found out was while he was on one of those sites, there was a hacker that got into their computer. Because this was a kid who was easily distracted, and yes, while the pornography was a lot of fun to look at, a pop-up appeared that let him play a game. It was a game where he got to shoot tangerines out of the sky. For a 10-year-old, this was perfect. So he played the game long enough to allow a hacker to put spyware on the computer and now go and watch everything that was happening on that monitor. So by the time he put the credit card number in, the hacker had the credit card number and now had stolen their identity. It is very important that you have some security on your computer. A firewall, antivirus, and anti-spyware, even if you have a Mac. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Even if you have a Mac. I know that Macs do not get nearly as many viruses as PCs, that is true, but they are still susceptible to these things. The monitoring software, that's spyware. That's when you go and you put something on the computer so you can watch everything your child does, every place they go, or everything your spouse does. It's not just your child. You can watch anything that's happening on that computer. That's spyware. Filtering is software that stops people from getting to specific sites. And yes, Microsoft.com/products has some great information about what other consumers think about monitoring filtering software. OS X, Leopard, and Vista both have built-in monitoring filtering software now. So you don't have to go out and buy an extra product if you don't want to. However, just please know, the best parental controls are your eyes, because there are always ways around them. Even if you think that you are seeing everything they do, that's not true, because they now have mobile devices. Even the iTouch connects to the internet. And they can be in the back seat of the car with you in the front seat and doing things that you don't know about. It's why those questions are so important. It can't just be about locking down the computer and monitoring and filtering. It has to be about a conversation. It has to be about the cyber sit-down. I'm stealing all your stuff, Dr. Furman. It has to be about the cyber sit-down as well, because you need to have these conversations. So when they go someplace else where things are not filtered and not monitored, they have a good sense of what is right, what is wrong, and what their responsibility is all about. Tips from the experts. Every expert agrees that the computer should be kept in a public place. This is a really hard thing for parents who have older teens, because they already have the laptops in their room. How many of you or your children have laptops? And they travel, right? Okay. The laptops pose a whole nother issue that I just want to talk about for a minute. Ergonomics. Something that no one's really talking about and we all should be talking about. We are seeing earlier onset of hand, eye, neck, wrist, and back problems because we are not sitting at the computer properly. We are giving our kids tools and technology that is actually could hurt them in the long run, and we don't realize it. Everyone do me a favor for a moment. Sit up nice and tall. Don't stand up, just sit up nice and tall. Sorry. Put your feet flat on the floor. Put your arms at your waist and your fingertips stretched out. Look straight ahead and type. Pretend to type. Is this how you all sit at the computer? No, but we're supposed to sit at the computer this way. We're also supposed to take breaks every 15 minutes and look away from the computer screen to help our eyesight. And every 30 to 60 minutes, we're supposed to get up and walk around. If they're using laptops and they're on their bed with their legs up and they're like this, it's not healthy for their bodies. So when I do have families that say to me, well, they've got a laptop and it roams and I can't stop them from going in their room, what I suggest is the laptop really should be on a desk. It should be on a desk. It should have an external keyboard and mouse attached to it so it's at waist level. If you are 5 feet tall like I am, wearing really big heels, but if you're 5 feet tall, my feet don't touch the floor, so I keep a box underneath my feet so that I can sit properly. That helps with sometimes keeping the computer in a public place, or at least if it's going to be in their room, you can configure it so that the monitor is facing the door outwards, so you can walk by. But all the experts agree, and it's because when they have access to a lot of privacy and the computer, there seems to be more opportunity for cyberbullying, exposure to inappropriate content, and what parents call internet addiction. But as Dr. Farley explained so well, it's not a true addiction. But kids and parents are reporting addiction because they don't know what else to call it. It is a behavioral issue, not a technology issue. And I'm so glad you said it the way you did, because we need to start treating the behavior and not just the technology. And we all need to understand this. I'm looking at my time, sorry. When I was 13 years old, I desperately wanted a phone line, my own phone line in my bedroom. Desperately. I begged my dad night and day. I finally wore him down. And he said, okay, you can have a phone line in your room. Not only did I get a phone line in my room, but because the jack was right by the door, he wrapped this really long cord all the way around the room so I could sit on my bed and talk on the phone. I was in heaven. For 3 days, I did nothing but talk on that phone. I wouldn't go to dinner. I wouldn't go to bed. My dad was getting more and more angry. He finally said to me, if you do not get off that phone, I am going to do something about it. My door was closed. I was not talking to him. So I came home one day from school, and it wasn't my phone that was gone, but my door. And he said to me, the phone is not the problem, you're the problem. And I've kept that with me until today. I still think about this. It wasn't the technology, it was the behavior. And guess what? My dad was right. I was having a major 13-year-old crisis. There was a boy I liked, and he didn't like me back. And I had to find out why. So I was on the phone for 3 days trying to figure it out. And my dad said to me, if you talk to me, if you open up, if you can tell me what's going on, then you can have the privacy that you're looking for. But when you shut down, I take your door away. It's really about the behavior and not just the technology. Now, I'm not saying the technology is not sometimes problematic. We see with the internet, things spread so much faster. And there's so much more access, and we need to keep that in mind. But we want to continue looking at the underlying behavior. Nothing good happens after midnight. This expert, again, is my father. When they have access to the webcam late at night, especially when they're at a sleepover, something happens to teens when they're at a sleepover. I don't know if they've had too much pop or too much pizza or what it is, but their brains start going a little kooky, and now they're going to do things that they wouldn't normally do. This is when I see the most cyberbullying, when I see the most overexposure, is late at night when they think nobody else is watching. I've had some parents who take the wireless router with them to bed. They disconnect it and they take it with them to bed. But we are seeing that when they have the access to technology late at night, that it is causing problems. So I am actually going to stop talking right now. I apologize for my voice. I really appreciate you listening, and thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. You guys will start taking your seats for dealing with round two. Good afternoon once again. My name is Freddie Weinstein, and I'm Chief Medical Officer at Dominican Hospital here in Santa Cruz, as well as Medical Director of Dominican Hospital's Behavioral Health Unit. And those of you who are unfamiliar with this format, in round 2 we have a question and answer panel here, and I collected already a number of questions that people have submitted, but if during this discussion people come up with more questions, they can simply drop it in that basket there and screen them for the appropriateness and figure out which one of our panel members are best suited to answer it. And I have to say that I'm a father of 5, and prior to this morning, my biggest anxiety was, having the kids learn to drive and being able to drive. But now it's like, I don't even know where to begin. So I will begin, however, by introducing our panel members here. You guys have already had a chance to meet Dr. Farley and Lori Getz, but we have 2 new recruits here. First is Detective Dave Pollock. Dave has worked for the Santa Cruz Police Department since 2000. In 2004, he was hired as police officer and is currently assigned to the investigations section. Dave's current assignment is in investigation sections include general property, crimes, arson investigations, crime scene investigations, fingerprint comparisons and examination, domestic terrorism investigation, and child exploitation investigations. Dave is a member of a 3-detective team at the Santa Cruz Police Department who are in the process of educating youth about internet safety and child exploitation. Dave has been employed as a high school teacher through the County of Santa Cruz, ROP program, Regional Occupational Program, in the topic of administration of justice. Much of his insight has come from his work with youth in both his personal and professional life. So we welcome Dave to our panel, and Dave, if you want to tell a bit more about yourself and how your work involves some of these issues, that'd be great.
Dr. Weinstein covered most of it. I'm typically a man of few words, but I appreciate being here today and being invited. I'm going to do my best to answer any questions you have. Unfortunately, I can't answer a lot of questions about current cases or cases that haven't been completely closed, but I'll do my best if you do have questions. I hope that covers it.
Okay, that works. And then our final panel member here is Irene Medina. Ms. Medina is currently a school counselor for the city of Santa Cruz at Mission Hills Middle School. She's in her 4th year as a professional school counselor with experience in high school counseling as well. Ms. Medina possesses a Bachelor's of Art in Spanish Lit from the University of California, Davis, my alma mater, and a Master's of Art in Counseling with a specialization in school counseling from the University of San Diego. Ms. Medina is currently working on her administrative services credential through the Educational Leadership Department at San Jose State. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Medina to our panel.
Thank you. The only thing I'd like to add that by no means am I an expert, but I can offer my personal and professional experience with working with kids and cyberbullying and what happens with that on our end.
So I have a number of questions here, and by far the one that was the most popular was taking Lori up on her offer on how to get the history of websites that someone has visited, even though they've attempted to delete that history and may have in some cases made up a fake history. So if you can tell us how to get that around, that'd be great.
Okay, sure. Let me start by answering the question, and then I want to offer my opinion on it as well, if you don't mind. First, in both Vista and OS X Leopard, so that's the most current versions of the operating systems for both Mac and PC, they have areas of parental controls within the system preferences. So for you PC users, you go to Control Panel. You guys are all writing this down, I love it. You go to the Control Panel, you go to Accounts, and then you'll find parental controls. Within the Mac, you start at the Apple, you look for System Preferences, Accounts, and then Parental Controls. You can set it up so that you are the administrator of the computer. That means that you have total access, and you can set up guest accounts or managed accounts underneath yours that you can then set some parental controls on. There is a log activity, an activity log that shows you every site that they have been on. Even after they clear the history, it still logs it there. There are also ways for you to record their iChat conversations. You can filter as well, so you can set certain limitations. You don't want them to see violent or pornographic sites, things of that sort. So all of those things are within the parental controls. Now, if I may offer my opinion about this. First, with young children, I think it's very important to set up the filtering software not as a safeguard, but as an expectation, so that you are teaching your children early on what it is that you expect of them. That you let them know, you can't do this without telling your kids that you're doing it. You let them know what the rules are, what the expectations are, how you feel about these things. If you wouldn't let them see an R-rated movie, then you don't want them looking at R-rated content on the internet. And that's the way that this needs to be approached, because as your children get older and they start entering those tween years, they have a really difficult time if you're filtering, because it pretty much limits a lot of what they can do. If you've got a 7th grader who wants to do breast cancer research, they won't be able to do it because they can't find anything with the word breast in it. So these filters become limiting, and unfortunately they're not granular enough at this point that you can really pinpoint what you want them to do and what you don't. The bigger issue that I have with these things is that when you set up the monitoring software, or the filtering software, but monitoring when you are watching all of their iChats, when you are looking at all of these logs, and you don't tell them that you're doing these things, you're spying on them, you're going to eventually send your kids underground. You're going to send them to their mobile devices, you're going to send them to their friends' houses, to school, to places where they can do these things, because by not setting up the expectation, not explaining to them why you're doing these things, you're just restricting without educating. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work in the physical world either. I do, however, feel, the same way my father took away my door, that when the behavior warrants it, you do what you have to do. If you are the type of parent who always picks up the phone receiver to listen to your son or daughter's conversation while they're having it, then you're going to be the parent that puts the spyware on the computer and watches everything they do. However, if you're the parent that only picks up that phone receiver when you think something's going on with your child and you're worried about them, then that's the way you need to approach the filtering and the monitoring software as well, that you have a conversation with them about it, that you sit down together and say, you know what, I just walked by your room, and as I got there, you shut down the laptop, and I want to know what was on it, because I don't let you walk out the front door without asking you where you're going. I'm not going to let you walk out into the entire world and not know where you're going. So.
And there was a
You've all heard of the helicopter parent, always hovering. And you really have to watch that on the internet, too.
There was a follow-up to that might have come from a divorce attorney, but they wanted a recommendation for a good spyware program that you can install to monitor your child or spouse's.
I would go to Microsoft.com/products, and you can get the answers there. I am not recommending any of them.
Did you say it was a divorce attorney?
Might have come. I'm just speculating. The next question was directed to Ms. Medina. If she could please speak to elaborate a little bit more on a topic that was brought up briefly, that of cyberbullying.
As many of you may be aware, in schools, especially in middle schools, which is where I'm at, we have a lot of bullying, period. It happens outside in the quad, during lunch, during brunch, but a lot of cases have been coming across our desks about cyberbullying, especially with phones, cell phones, and MySpace. MySpace is a huge place where the kids bully one another. And what has come across in my work is girls being really vicious towards one another on MySpace, thinking that no one's ever going to see it. Fortunately enough, these young ladies trusted their parents enough to bring it to their attention, and that's what brought it to our attention. There isn't a clear-cut educational code or disciplinary actions that we can partake in as educators in our district, but because there are relationships on our campus, it's our professional duty and ethic to try and resolve those issues as quickly as possible. So that's what happens a great deal at the school. Unfortunately, it happens more often than not, and that's just one example of many that come through, and it's, 6th through 8th grade kids. So they're not, like Lori touched on, they don't know that, and Dr. Farley touched on, that they are really not aware that their information is really, really public. And we bring in the Santa Cruz Police Department in as well with some of the accusations and bullying that was happening online.
And just to add to that, there hasn't been legislation until currently that actually allowed law enforcement or even the education code or people who can enforce it to really have any repercussions or do anything with the kids who are involved with that. Recently, there was some legislation passed in the education code that allows school administrators to suspend or expel kids who are bullying or cyberbullying and whatnot.
Can I add something to it?
Sure.
One of the things that I talk to the students about, because I get to talk to large groups of students and I get to spend a lot of time in 4th through 9th grade classrooms. And it's really interesting, but I have found that when they understand what cyberbullying is, when I tell them that it is sending a mean or harassing message or posting a picture without someone's knowledge in order to embarrass them, or using instant messaging to pretend to be somebody they're not in order to engage in harassing or embarrassing behavior, then they start to get it. Part of the problem is that, like you said, they don't know that what they're doing is necessarily wrong or has consequences. Sometimes they do, not all the time, but sometimes they do know. So one of the things that I've been doing is helping schools to create a cyber citizenship contract, where teachers in human development or in an ethics class will get the kids together and they will create a contract themselves so that they're participating in this education, saying that this is what they agree to do or not to do online, that they will not pretend to be one another using IM, that they will not send mean or threatening messages using email. They will not post pictures of one another and tag them so that they can maintain somebody else's right to privacy. And that seems to help because they need to understand it before they know that they've made a mistake.
One issue in bullying in general is real bullying, old-fashioned bullying, not online but offline bullying. One of the main things that is a prevention for offline bullying is if somebody else stands up for you. If you're being bullied, and if even one person stands up in your defense, that tends to be one of the more effective treatments. The problem is that we don't know if that works online, and probably doesn't. It's kind of irrelevant online. That's one person will come to your defense online when, and it's not somebody who you might even know personally or is not there physically. And so one of the issues in online bullying is prevention, and also preventing the effects psychologically on the recipient of the bullying. And we honestly don't know a lot about the latter in particular. How do you deal with the psychological effects on the victim? And we need a lot more research on that particular facet.
Thank you. The next question was addressed to primarily, I guess, Lori and Irene, and it's what kind of support or curriculum do or should schools and school districts offer in the way of professional development and training around this for educators?
Do you want to hit that one? Go ahead, Lori.
Okay. So recently there was an amendment passed to the Child Internet Protection Act that said any school that receives E-rate funding, is that what it's?
I believe so.
I think E-rate funding, that's funding for data and voice communication, that those schools are required to bring internet education to their students. However, no one bothered to tell them how or who was going to pay for it. So this just happened in October of 2008. So schools are now working, well, at least E-rate funded schools are working to develop proposals so that they can continue receiving their funding on how they're going to bring internet education to their students and to their faculty and to their parents. I have been, I think, at 32 schools since September and bringing this education to them. Right now, I'm also in the process of authoring something called Safety Kit on the Net, which is curriculum for 1st through 4th grade, because there is a desire for this. Schools are starting to come around and realize that they need to bring this education. Up until recently, the E-rate funded schools were restricted. Their hands were tied. They were not allowed to allow access to the internet, to certain sites, and there was a lot of restrictions put on them. Now they're moving more towards education. So that's a positive.
And just to add a little bit too, at our school, parents initiated the want to have more training on what they should be looking for online when their kids are online. A lot of parents, same as kids, didn't realize that, yes, their information is very, very public, and so giving the information to the parents about what to look for was very eye-opening for them, and they're asking for more. They're asking for more information, for more type of training to specifically to handle those things with their their tweens, their 6th through 8th graders.
Schools, teachers in training at universities don't get a lot of this stuff, and they should. And they really don't, and unless they've learned it themselves growing up, and so on, they don't know a lot about everything that's being talked about here. And that's why something like this is so valuable. Let's see, I forgot my other thought. It was so great that I can't think of it.
It's too profound. Well, the next question is for Detective Pollack, and that's, if you could, without any kind of specific, case revealing information, comment on how extensive issues are involving cybercrime against our youth, and if possible, any statistics that you might have around that.
Well, it's something that I've noticed. I started back in 2000. Like I said, the legislation wasn't really there to support any of it. There were cases that would come in that were very much cyberbullying that at the time we didn't know were cyberbullying. It was harassment or other types of things that aren't really crimes at the time. As we've become more educated, we realized what it is that's in front of us. We realized that the problem is much more large scale than we really thought it was at one point in time. The statistics vary for each real subject that you're talking about, as far as online exploitation of youth versus cyberbullying versus people being to people online. I'm sure you're probably going to have some more updated statistics than I have. The last statistics I had were 1 in 7 children is approached online for sexual